right, Shabbos, say good morning and a good yar. Let's begin. Today's daf is Mem Aleph. Yasher Koach. It was so beautiful yesterday that during the short break on Yom Kippur, Baruch Hashem, we had a full base medrash, and I think most people remember the daf. Baruch Hashem. But so today's daf is Mem Aleph. We are going to pick up. We actually ended off. We covered a lot of ground yesterday. We actually ended off on the top of Mem Aleph, but I'm going to take you back this morning just to the bottom of Mem Amud Beis. Amr Shmuel. Amr Rabbi Zera. It's 2, 4, 5 lines up from the bottom. Last few words on the line. Amr Rabbi Zera, Amr Rav Mas, Amr Shmuel. Tcheles in ba mishum kilayim. The halacha is that there is no shatnez by tcheles. There is no shatnez by tcheles, which means, well, we'll see exactly what it means. What it seems to mean is that halacha lemaisa. It's halacha lemaisa that if the tzitzis themselves are comprised of tcheles, so that it doesn't represent any type of shatnez problem. Va'afilu b'talis p'tura, and even if they are placed on a talis which is technically not subject to the laws of tzitzis. So the Gemara says, "My talis p'tura." What does that mean? Ilim with the less shiura. If you want to say that they're being placed on a beged that doesn't have the requisite shear, but yet the halacha still is that there's no problem of kilayim. That's not true. Tanya, we learned we spoke about this halacha in depth yesterday. That if you have a talis, a garment, which ultimately again is large enough for a child to cover the majority of his body, top of Mem Aleph, and it's the type of beged, that a gadol, that an adult would wear out on an infrequent basis. So Rashi points out if he's going out to the shuk, he's running out to the supermarket, he would put on this beged b'derech aray. He wouldn't wear it on a normal level, but if he has to run out, he would use it. Chayav es b'tzitzis. Such a beged is chayav in tzitzis. So you see that by tzitzis there seems to be that the beged has a minimum shear. However, but if the katan ultimately again would not cover the majority of his body with it, if the katan can't cover the majority of his body with it, even if a gadol would wear it, derech aray, pater, ultimately again it is pater from tzitzis. And the same halachos that apply to tzitzis also apply to shatnez. So the Rabbi said, the Gemara asked, we asked about this, what does that statement mean that these same halachos apply to shatnez? If you want to say that it means that the same halachos apply for isser kilayim, then I will say that a beged is only subject to the prohibition of kilayim if it's large enough that it covers the head and the majority of the body of a katan, and a gadol would wear it derech aray when he has to go out to the shuk. So there's a problem with that. We learned ein aray b'kilayim. We learned that when it comes to kilayim, any shear, any amount is problematic. In other words, that even if it's a smaller garment, it is still subject to the laws of shatnez. So we're trying to figure out what does this mean. And also, interestingly enough, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok said that what? The same halacha also applies ultimately to the sheet or to a linen sheet by tzitzis. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Vam Rav Nachman, it's the first of the short lines in Rashi. My v'chein le'inyan kilayim v'chein le'inyan sadim and tzitzis. Alma tzitzis betalis she'in bashir yesh ba mishum kilayim. Therefore, what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, if you have a garment that ultimately again doesn't have the shear for tzitzis, it is still subject to kilayim. So we'll say, here's what's interesting. We've spent a lot of time trying to go ahead and create an overlap between the halachos of shatnez and tzitzis. And again, rightfully so, because of that juxtaposition which tells us that tzitzis is permitted to be shatnez. What the Gemara is now doing over here, we'll say, is untangling these halachos and saying that there is a dramatic difference. What's the dramatic difference? Tzitzis require a shear. What's the shear for tzitzis? It has to be, the beged has to be large enough that it covers the majority of the body of a katan, and an adult would wear, which is the same shear that an adult would wear derech aray if he had to run out to the supermarket, right? If I have to run out, I'll throw something on. What's the minimum beged that I'll throw on? A beged that is large enough to cover the majority of the body of a katan. People say that is the smallest shear of a beged that is chayiv in tzitzis. Yet, when it comes to shatnez, there is no minimum shear for the prohibition of shatnez. Even the smallest of begadim is chayiv ultimately in shatnez. So therefore, again, the Gemara says elamai p'tura. So ultimately, again, so what does it mean, Abosei, when we said before that if you have tchelis in your tzitzis, and the tzitzis themselves are shatnez, then ultimately, again, there's no prohibition, even if the talis itself is p'tura. What's the talis p'tura that we're referring to over here in this brayso? Hetel mutalos. What it means ultimately is, we'll say that halacha l'maisa, if you went ahead and you put shatnez tzitzis, get ready for this case, shatnez tzitzis on a beged that already has tzitzis, you're not chayav for shatnez. Okay, so I'll say, so the Gemara says, Vaha Amar Rabbi Zera Chadazimna. Rabbi Zera already taught us that on Yom Kippur. He taught us that yesterday, right? Then remember again, we spoke about that case where you put tzitzis on a beged. I remember I invented the new word. Remember my new word for Yom Kippur? Tzitzist. Right, tzitzist. If you put, nobody remembers that? I was excited to remember that. Thank you. Right, so I'll say, so again, so we already learned that yesterday, that if you put tzitzis on a beged that is already tzitzist, right? Then what? Then halacha l'maisa, it still works. So the Gemara says, so that's the case. That's the case. The Gemara says, that's what it means when it says, if you put shatnez tzitzis on a beged that is p'tura, you're not chayiv mishum shatnez. So we'll say, so that's the case ultimately of putting a second pair of tzitzis. Remember we spoke about this, why isn't it bal tosif, all the different things like that. So the Gemara says, we already learned that case, to which the Gemara says, chada michlal dechaver te'itmar. Or is essentially, one case is being inferred or being learned out from the other. The idea being, yes, we said it yesterday, but this statement, this Bryce is coming to be mosif on that case. Good. Tanravanan. Tasmo says, first of all, we emerged, by the way, with two very important pieces of information here. Number one, that there is a minimum shear for the beged of tzitzis. What's the minimum shear for the beged of tzitzis? The beged has to be large enough that a katan could cover the majority of his body, or of his head, and of his head, and the majority of his body, which translates into the minimum shear that an adult would wear with a beged if he has to run out. If he has to run out quickly somewhere, it was called Levisha Derech Harai, he would wear that. We'll discuss exactly. And by the way, we'll say that is halacha l'maisa. That's what we spoke about yesterday. If your tzitzis is too small, your beged is too small, you do not fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. So we'll speak about again what the actual size of that is. Your tzitzis have to be in alignment with your body, right? Have to have an actual shear to them. What we also learn is that halacha l'maisa, there is no minimum shear for shatnez. That any beged that you wear that is shatnez, even the smallest of begadim, ultimately again can be subject to the prohibition. Tarabanan. Talis kfula chayav v'sis. Rabosei is a very interesting case. Talis kfula, Rabosei, is I have an oversized garment. So what I do is I fold it in half. But if you can imagine, I'm folding it in half along the length of the garment. So now watch this. When I fold it in half along the length of the garment, it just happens to be that's the case of folding it in half of the length. I effectively create two new corners of the garment. I lose two corners, but I also create two new corners. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha chayeves betzitzis? The halacha is you have to put tzitzis along the two new corners. On the two new corners. Rabbi Shimon says, you don't have to go ahead and put tzitzis on the two new corners. V'shavin shim kafla v'tavra shechayev. So we'll say Rabbi Shimon's logic of saying that you don't have to go ahead. Here, look at Rashi for just a moment. Good morning, Mr. Schoenfeld. The Gemara says, look at Rashi. Talis kfula shay sa'aruka kishtayim v'kafla. It was very long, and I went ahead and I folded it in half. Rabbi Shimon Poter shim tipashet nimtseis tzitzios be'emtziyusa. So we'll say Rabbi Shimon says, here's the problem. The problem is you don't have to put tzitzis on that because if you unfold it, then what's going to happen? You're going to end up having tzitzis where Rabosai by the head. You see, the idea over here is I'm folding it along the length, and then I'm going to wear it widthwise. So I have four corners now. So the problem Rabbi Shimon says, if you end up putting tzitzis by the new corner, what's going to end up happening? I will say, if I ever choose to unfold it, I'm going to have tzitzis by my head. And obviously, again, that's not the mitzvah of tzitzis. So we'll say, b'shavin, they both agree that what? Shim kafla v'tafra shechayeves. That if you sew it, if I fold it and sew it, that I will be chayiv in tzitzis along the new corners. Why? Because the act of sewing the garment represents a certain level of permanence. So because there's an element of permanence here, therefore I have to put tzitzis on the new corners. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious? If you sew it, right? If you sew it, then halacha l'maisa again, you are creating effectively a new beged. To which the Gemara says, lo tzricha denakta b'sichi. No, when we speak about sewing it, lav dafka that it means with stitching, but rather it means like with pins. So I'm pinning it together. So I might have thought, so therefore, even though the pinning doesn't necessarily have the same level of permanence as stitching itself, nevertheless, that's enough of a permanence to make you chayiv in tzitzis. Rabba bar Huna ikla lebei Rabba bar Rav Nachman. So listen to this. Rabba bar Huna went to the house of Rabba bar Rav Nachman. Chazid of a michsei talis kfula. He saw that Rabba bar Rav Nachman was wearing a folded talis. He was wearing a folded talis. V'rami leichutei ilui kfela. And ultimately, again, he went ahead and he put tzitzis on the area of the fold. Or is that the area of the fold also became a new corner, and he put tzitzis on the area of the fold. If shita, so at some point in time the garment became opened up, v'asa chuta v'kam lahadi reshe. And what happens? He discovered that what? That now he had tzitzis by his head. Or as I was say, when the fold opened up, so ultimately now again what was a corner once again becomes the top of the beged, so that he has tzitzis by his head. Amar le lav hainu knaf the kasav rachmana ba'araisa. He said that this is not the corner that the Torah refers to. In other words, you don't need tzitzis like this. Asa shajay. He went ahead and he took off the beged. So he took off the folded beged. He said, I'm not going to wear this beged. So what happens? It will say ichse glima achrisi, and he covered himself with another beged. Amar le, we'll say, listen to this, and this opens up a brand new conversation. Amar le, mi savis chovis gavrahu, chovis talasu, zil ramile. So he says to him, what do you think? You think that by taking off the beged, suddenly you've alleviated the problem? Tzitzis is not a chovis gavra, tzitzis is a chovas cheftza. We'll say, so this is a dramatic statement. You see, he said to him, what do you think? You think by taking off the garment you've alleviated the problem? No. Even if you're not wearing the garment, ultimately what? There is a din of putting tzitzis on the garment itself. So we'll say, so now, what we've just opened up over here is a brand new element of this conversation. Up until now, we have always assumed that the din of tzitzis is not a din in a four-cornered garment. It's a din in what? A four-cornered garment that I wear. So we'll say, so now what the Gemara is suggesting of Rabbi Rav Huna is saying, you think by taking off the garment you've alleviated the issue. It's not true. The mere existence of a four-cornered garment, by definition, requires the placement of tzitzis. So it's nice that you took it off, rolled it into a ball, and threw it into the corner. That doesn't take care of the issue. Let me say this. Let's listen to this. So say that this following supports them. Chasidim harishonim, the early Chasidim, kevan she'argu ba shalosh. Once, we'll say, remember again, we spoke about this yesterday. The early Hasidim, once they went ahead and they wove 3 finger breadths of a garment, hayu matilin batchelas. They would go ahead and already begin, they would put tzitzis on that garment. I will say, remember again, in yesterday's daf, we reinterpreted that statement. How did we reinterpret that statement? Remember again, how did we reinterpret it? To mean that as soon as they got the 3 finger breadths of the end of the garment was fully woven. They got to the end, because the halacha is you put tzitzis within 3 finger breadths of the edge of the garment. They would already put tzitzis there. Now the Gemara is understanding it in a literal sense. No, what it actually means is Chasidim Harishonim, when they would go ahead and what? When they would actually go ahead and just weave a garment that was 3 finger breadths, they would already put tzitzis on that. So both say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa. Now let's go back for just a moment. We'll say it's very exciting because we get to bring together everything we've learned. Based on what we just learned, tzitzis, a beged only becomes chayiv in tzitzis when? When it's large enough, ultimately again to cover rosho v'rubo of a katan. Clearly, when it's 3 finger breadths, it does not satisfy that criteria. Yet, now what do you see? Chasidim Rishonim were still going in and putting tzitzis on it. To which the Gemara says, "Shani Chasidim demachmira anafshayu." Don't bring a raya from the Chasidim. Right? The Chasidim are always machmir. Right? These Chasidim ultimately again were machmir on themselves, but it does not go ahead and generate normative practice. Good. Upliga, I'll say this is wild. Upliga de malacha. And ultimately, again, this argues on the statement of the malachim. Incredible. Let's say, see, That's what Yom Kippur does for you. Yom Kippur allows you to argue with malachim. Upliga de malachim, Rashi says over here, Rashi says, Dirama Barav Huna, the Hamalach Omer Dechovas Gavru. So that's this. The Malacha Ashkechei Rav Katina. Listen to this. There was once a Malach who found Rav Katina the Michse Sadina. And Rav Katina was wearing a sadin. We've already begun to see sadin always refers to a linen garment. So Rav Katina was wearing a linen garment. Amarle Katina, Sadina Bakaita, Visarbala Bisisva. So he says, so the Malach called out to him, Katina, in the summer you wear a linen garment, and in the winter you wear a woolen garment. Now we'll say, now what does this mean? Take a look at Rashi. Rashi says, Dimichseis Sadina, Telo Havileit Tzitzis, Kedarmina Le'el Mishum Ksus Laila. So we're going to qualify this a little bit. But apparently, again, Rav Katina was wearing a linen garment in the winter. This linen garment, as we'll see, was Ksus Laila, was a garment that was normally worn at night. Ksus Laila, we alluded to this in yesterday's daf. We heard a lot in yesterday's daf. So Ksus Laila, garment worn by night, is not chayiv in tzitzis, or isem also. Doesn't exempt a Ksus Laila. So he would wear, so during the winter, he would go ahead and wear this linen garment. In the summer, he would wear a linen garment, which was ultimately, again, pater from tzitzis because of Ksus Laila, which we'll discuss. And in the winter, he would wear a woolen garment. Now, if you look at Rashi, Rashi says, Sarbala, Kigon Osan Shalanu Shahin Agulan Ve'in Shnei Knafayim. So we'll say this woolen garment had two rounded corners. You don't even need two rounded corners. One rounded corner is enough. Because that one rounded corner, therefore what? It was pater from tzitzis. So he says to him, so the Malach called out, Katina, in the summertime you wear a linen garment, which is pater from tzitzis. In the winter time, you wear a woolen garment, which is a rounded corner, pater from tzitzis. Tzitzis shall tcheles matei aleh. What's going to happen with the mitzvah of tzitzis? Right? So the Malach was giving him musar. Katina, the clothing you wear is always pater from tzitzis. Apparently, again, during the summertime, the linen garment you wear is pater from tzitzis. During the winter time, the woolen garment you wear is pater from tzitzis. What is going to be with the mitzvah of tzitzis? Amarle, anashiso aseh. So Katina says to the Malach, tell me, Malach, am I held in Shamayim? Do they punish you for the non-performance of an asay? But we'll say tzitzis is an asay, is a positive commandment. So if Katina is saying, okay, I don't, it's true, my begadim happen to be pater from the mitzvah of tzitzis, tell me in Shamayim, do they hold you accountable for the non-performance of an asay, for the non-performance of a positive commandment? Amarle bisman di ikarischa anshinan. So the Malach says, yes. When there is a period of divine wrath, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu holds us accountable for everything, even for what? Even for the non-performance of a positive mitzvah. When there's a time of divine wrath, not only am I held accountable for my averos, but ultimately I'm held accountable for the non-performance of my mitzvos. So we'll say, now watch this. I amrit bishlam achovas gavru hainu demechayev delo karami. So we'll say, if you hold that tzitzis, there's a din of tzitzis on me as an individual, I have an obligation towards tzitzis. I understand why the Malach is giving Rav Katina musar. We'll say it's a very important Gemara. But if you understand that tzitzis is not a chovas gavra, but tzitzis is what? A chova on the cheftza, on the object. If there's a four-cornered garment, you have to put tzitzis on it. Then what? Why is the Malach giving Rav Katina musar? Right, it was at the end of the day, if the garment is pater from tzitzis, what's the musar here, Abosa? What's the musar? If it's not a four-cornered garment or it's ksus lai, let's give you musar. Abosa, get ready for this. Elamai chovas gavru. Ultimately, again, but rather, what do you have to say? You're right. Tzitzis is an obligation on the individual. The Gemara says, "Nehi dechayvi rachmana ki michse talas debas chiyuva ki michse talas delav bas chiyuva mi chayvi rachmana." So we'll say, the reality is, it's both. Tzitzis is an obligation upon me when I wear a garment that is four corners. See, I will say, as we're going to see in just a little bit, see, if you hold that tzitzis is a chova on the cheftza, on the object, that means even if I'm not wearing it, you have to put tzitzis on it. That's going to be counterintuitive, as we're going to see in just a little bit. So I will say, so really, tzitzis is an obligation upon me, but only when I am wearing a garment that has four corners, right? That's only, if I am not wearing a garment that has four corners, there's no chiyuv. So why does the malach give Rav Katina Moshe get ready? Elachi kamarlei tetznaki lemiftar nafshich mitzitzis. So the malach was saying to Rav Katina, in Shemayim it looks like you're finding ways to exempt yourself from the mitzvah. See, Rabbosai, the musar that the malach was giving Rav Katina is such a profound musar. You're right. Are you living on the right side of the law? Absolutely. You're wearing a non-four-cornered garment or a garment that's not chayav v'tziz. Rav Katina, let me ask you, why? Why does it look like in Shemayim you're trying to go out of your way to exempt yourself from this halachot? Rabbosai, you understand the incredible musar of this. It could be that a person could go through life and I'm living on the right side of the law, right? I'm living a legal life. But I will say sometimes we go ahead and we cut corners, right? No pun intended, right? We cut corners, right? I will say, and ultimately, again, we do things to exempt ourselves and to not have to push ourselves. I'm not committing an aveira. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm still living in the right side of the law. But the shayla is it right? Just because I'm not committing an aveira doesn't mean that what I'm doing in my life is right. And that was the musar that the malach was giving to Rav Katina. Are you living in the confines of the law? Are you halachically okay? Absolutely. Is what you're doing right? No. And I will say that's the musar because sometimes we're good as long as it's not us. Is it usher? It's not usher. Okay, just because it's not usher doesn't mean it's mutter, and even if it's mutter, doesn't mean that it's good. Our job in life is not, we'll say, the metric of a successful life is, today I avoided Gehenna. Right? Okay, it's a good start. To avoid Gehenna is a very good start, right? To avoid Averas is a good start. I don't want to live a life of avoiding Gehenna, I want to live a life of Olam Haba. That was the Moshe that the Malach was giving to Rav Katina. Amrav Tuvi Bar Kis Amar Shmuel. Klei Kufsa Chayavim Mitzvah. So now the logical extension of this conversation is as follows. Klei Kufsa. What are Klei Kufsa? Exactly as it sounds. They are, look at Rashi, Klei Kufsa, first line in Rashi, Talisos Haru'uyim L'tzitzis, Afa Pisha Mikupalos Umunachos Bekufsa Chayavim B'tzitzis. So listen to this. So this is literally, I have four-cornered garments that are folded up in a drawer. They're sitting in a drawer, meaning I'm not wearing them. They're sitting in my drawer. So the Shaila is, and now the Gemara says, Rav Tuvi Bar Kisna says, in the name of Shmuel, that even clothing sitting in a drawer is chayiv in tzitzis. So we'll say, this goes with the school of thought that tzitzis is an obligation on the cheftza, not on the gavra. Umod Shmuel bezakin shasol lechvodo shepatura. Let's listen to this. But Shmuel agrees with a zaken who made a four-corner talis lichvodo, for his glory, for his honor, that is pater of tzitzis. We'll say, what's the garment that a zaken makes for his kavod? It's his tachrichim. It's his burial shrouds. See, we'll say everyone agrees that burial shrouds, which are sitting in the drawer, ultimately, again, are pater from tzitzis. You don't have to put tzitzis because we'll say, why? Because what's the logic? The logic is he has no intention of wearing them now while he is alive. My taima, asher techaseba amrachmana haylav lachsuyi avida. Because we'll say everyone agrees the obligation of tzitzis is only for clothing that is foreseeably wearable, right? And therefore, again, that doesn't apply to the tachrichim. To which the Gemara says, by his shaita. But when a person dies, certainly vaday raminamei. We certainly put tzitzis on tachrichim. I will say this is a dramatic statement. We certainly put tzitzis on tachrichim. Why? Mishum loeg l'rash cheref oseu. Because I will say again, this loeg l'rash cheref oseu. Ultimately, again, that he who mocks the pauper blasphemes his creator. So we'll say, so this idea over here is that when the person dies, we certainly go ahead and put tzitzis on the tachrichim in order that what? In order that it shouldn't be a degradation of the mace. If you don't put tzitzis on the tachrichim, then what? You're so the Gemara understands it as you are making fun of the mace, so to speak. You're denigrating the mace, that he can no longer go ahead and fulfill this particular mitzvah. And I will say, if you remember this sugya, we did this in Moed Katan, and this is a major machlokes about what we do with the talis of a mace. Contemporary practice is we actually cut off one corner of the talis to go ahead and passel the talis that is used for tachrichim, but in and of itself is a fundamental. I was just telling Rav Chaim this, that the Tamei Minhagim brings down an interesting minhag that when someone gets a new talis, we give them the bracha that you should be zocha to be buried in it. It's an interesting bracha. I will say, but the idea is that we say to the person is you should be zocha to fulfill the mitzvah of talis, of tzitzis throughout your life and be buried in it. Because we both say there's a whole discussion about whether or not you bury a person in a talis that's kosher. Why? If a person fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis during their life, that person wore tzitzis, not just talis. If you wore tzitzis during your life, then to be buried in your talis is a kavod, because it's a testament to the fact that you fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis during your lifetime. If you did not wear tzitzis during your lifetime, and then you're buried in a talis with tzitzis, it's a little bit of what's the right word? Disingenuous. Thank you. It's disingenuous. So during your lifetime you didn't wear tzitzis, and now you're dead and you wear tzitzis. So there's a whole tension in halacha about whether. Some suggest. So if we know the person went ahead and fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis, we'll bury them in a talis that is kosher. And if they didn't fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, we'll bury them in a talis that doesn't have tzitzis. Well, that doesn't shtim well, I will say, because what's going to happen? Everybody comes to Levaya. The first thing they're going to be looking for is, what do you see, right? 4, 3, what do you see over there? Chaim Yankel, I knew he never wore tzitzis. So therefore, I will say, at least in, I don't know what they do in Eretz Yisrael, but at least in America, the contemporary practice is that if a person is buried in the talis, we generally cut off a corner of the talis. We bury the mace in a talis that has one corner cut off. Again, that's minhag. I don't know what happens. Eretz Yisrael has its own set of burial minhagim. So the idea over here, at least according to the Gemara over here, even if you hold that halacha lemaisa, so clothing in the drawer goes ahead and gets tzitzis, it doesn't apply to tachrichim. But when the mace is buried in the tachrichim, at least according to the Gemara over here, you certainly put the tzitzis on the tachrichim. Amar Rachel, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Talis shenikra chutz l'shalosh yitbar, toch shalosh lo yitbar. We'll say another halacha. If your talis, if the garment tears within 3 finger breadths of the corner, you should sew it up. I'm sorry, outside of 3 finger breadths, you should sew it up. Within 3 finger breadths, you should not sew it up. But we'll say that goes back to yesterday's daf. What are we concerned with? We're concerned with that if it rips within 3 finger breadths and you sew it up and you have extra thread, you may end up what? Using that thread as part of the tzitzis, and then as we spoke about yesterday, you run into tasav lo mena asui. Tanya Hachi, we write that supports this talis shenikra chutz l'shalosh yitbar toch shalosh. So we'll say if the talis tears outside of 3 finger breadths of the edge, you should sew it up. But if it's within 3 finger breadths, then what? Rabbi Meir Omer lo yachbar, lo yitbar. Excuse me. Rabbi Meir says you shouldn't sew it up. Chum yitbar. Chum say you can't sew it up. B'shavin shelo yavi afilu ama al ama mimokum acher. But they both agree that what? That you should not bring the corner of another garment that already has tzitzis attached to it and sew it onto this torn baguette. They both say now the idea over here is, because that's obvious, there I'm taking tzitzis that was already part of another corner of another baguette. You can't cut off already made tzitzis that's on a corner from another baguette, and you can't do a corner transplant, right? You can't do a tzitzis transplant from one baguette to another. Now you could untie tzitzis from a previous baguette, as we'll see in just a moment, and retie that, but you can't take already tied tzitzis, cut off the corner, and transplant the corner to another baguette. V'shavin shemevi tchelis imakom acher v'toleba. Rabbi say what you can do is you could untie tzitzis that was on another baguette and what? Retie it onto a new baguette. Ubilvad amad beis shelote mufsekes. Right? Ultimately, again, that's assuming that all of the strings from the previous baguette, ultimately, again, are what? Are whole, are not ripped. Shmamina matirin mi beged le beged. So we'll say, what do you learn from here? You learn from here that you could untie tzitzis from one baguette in order to tie them onto another baguette. So we'll say, so 2 important halachas, which we're going to develop it just. But number 1, we'll say this is actually very interesting. Let's say again, I have a talis that's no good anymore. So we'll say, so what happens? But the tzitzis are perfect. I have a great chap. What am I going to do? And it happens to have the corners are beautiful. Don't even get me started how beautiful the corners are. So I have a great chap. What am I going to do? I'm going to cut off the corner of Beged A and just what? Sew them onto Beged B, and it's beautiful. This is a chaperayim with the beautiful corners of Beged A, and what? I don't have to retie the tzitzis. Beautiful, except that what? It's possible. You can't do a corner transplant from one Beged to another Beged with fully intact tzitzis. What you can do is untie tzitzis, totally untie tzitzis from one Beged and put them on a new Beged. That's called matirin mi Beged le Beged. To which the Gemara says, well, maybe not. Maybe the case that the Gemara is talking about Dilma Di'i Beloy. We'll say maybe the case ultimately, again, where we allow you to take tzitzis from one beged and put it on another beged is what kind of case we'll say? Where the first beged got worn out. Maybe that's the case of matirin mi beged lebeged. That's the case where you can untie from one beged to. But if the first beged doesn't get worn out, who says you're allowed to go ahead and take tzitzis off an old beged to put it on a new beged? So we'll say, so now this is going to be subject to machlokes. Tan Rabbanan, here we go. Talish shekula tcheles. We'll say, listen to this. We're gonna change subjects for just a moment, but we're gonna come back. We'll say this discussion of matirin mi beged lebeged is a very, very important one that happens quite often. I like my tzitzis, but my talis gets a bit worn out. I'd like to transfer my tzitzis to a new beged. Am I allowed to do that? So here we go. Tan Rabbanan. Talish shekula tcheles.
Amen.
Here we go. Talis shekula tcheles. If I have a talis, I will say that is made all of tcheles. So this is the beged. The beged is fully tcheles. So what's talacha? Kol minei tzivonin potrin ba. We'll say, listen to this. It's actually very interesting. You could have your tzitzis of your tcheles beged could be whatever color you want. Now, we'll say, remember again, we spoke about the idea that how do we know that normally again tzitzis has to be white and blue? Remember, where do we learn the white from? Kanaf. Right? Excellence. From kanaf, from the corner. So so normally we say, tzitzis is on the corner. Tzitzis has to be min kanaf. Has to be resemble the corner. We normally assume the corner, the beged is white, is wool. Right? And therefore the tzitzis should be white. And then of course, then psil tcheles have to have tcheles as well. If the beged is not white, in this case it's tcheles, so there is no obligation to have white strings. If there's no obligation to have white strings, then what? It could be what? What color? Any color you want. Any color you want. V'chol minei tzivonin potrin ba chutz mikala ilan. We'll say with one exception, which is this type of blue that is not tcheles. This type of blue that's not tcheles, that comes from a tree. So they used to produce this color blue that actually we saw in yesterday's daf already. This tree dye that very much resembled tcheles. That you cannot go ahead and use on this talis. Look at Rashi. Kol minei tzivan potrin ba l'shum lavan dechevan demin kanaf leka l'kiyumei ba ein lecha lachzer achar lavan. So interesting enough, there's actually no obligation to have white strings in this type of talis because there's no min kanaf. The beged itself is blue. You can have whatever color you want. Chutz mikala ilan the damile tcheles. So we'll say, so if you could have any color, why can't I use this blue dye from the tree? So we'll say, here's what's interesting. The concern is that one day you may come to go ahead and sell this talis to someone else. The person who buys it sees all of the blue strings and he assumes that what? Everything is tcheles. He may come to take of these strings and use them for a different talis. He may take two blue strings, assuming they're all tcheles, use them for a different talis, and it could be that what? The blue strings that he's taking to use for a different talis are in fact what Rabbi say? Not tcheles strings, but kala ilan strings. Therefore, again, you could use whatever color you want, but if you're going to use blue for the strings, the blue must always be tcheles. It's incredible. Not because of us, I want to be clear. If I use it on the talis I'm using, it's fine. It doesn't invalidate the talis because the strings can be whatever color you want. The concern is down the road. If I sell this to someone else, another person is not going to be able to distinguish between tcheles and kala ilan. Therefore, again, if you're going to put multicolored strings, amongst them blue, the blue has to be tcheles. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, talis ein poter ba, ela mina. But I will say, ultimately again we learned that halacha l'maisa, if you have a talis made out of a material, so the tzitzis should be made of that same material. That's what it means. Talis ein poter ba, ela mina. Only the material of the talis itself satisfies the criteria for tzitzis. Talis shekula tcheles. Ultimately, again, if you have a talis that's made fully of tcheles, maybe tcheles v'davar achar v'toleba. You should bring tcheles, right? You have to have a string that's tcheles, and davar achar, and anything else, and you could use it ultimately, again, as the strings for the tzitzis. The kala ilan, but I will say kala ilan, which again is this blue dye that comes from the tree. Lo yavi, you should not use in a talis where the beged is kula tcheles. Vim hevi kasher. But if you used it, the talis is still going to be kosher. Shabbos, we just got finished saying that what? That you can't use kala ilan. Now we're saying that lechatchili you shouldn't, but b'diavad if you did it's kosher. Rav Nachar bar Yitzchak lo kasha. It's not a contradiction. Kan betalis bas arba chutin, kan betalis bas shmona chutin. We'll say it depends if we're talking about a talis. We're gonna expound on this more. A talis made of 4 strings versus a talis made of 8 strings. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Talis bas dalit chutin, shnayim tchiles ushnayim kala ilan kosher. If ultimately you're gonna say you have 4 strings, 4 of them made of tchiles. 2 of them made of tchiles, 2 of them made of kala ilan, it'll be kosher. Talis bas shmona, just reading Rashi, then we'll explain. Talis bas shmona chutin, but if it's made of 8 strings, arba tchilas hitilba, vetilba arba kala ilan, lekayim mitzvahs shnei minin psulin dahoyel ulebar kala ilan, ika chutin kol tzarcha, chayshinan delma mitzrach letalis achrisi, v'shakil hanach de tchilas meacha, v'tali lehasam, v'lekahacha ela kala ilan, inami shakan. So we'll say here's the issue. The issue ultimately again is, if ultimately he's making it out of a talis of 4 strings, so therefore again there's no concern that a person may come to go ahead and reuse the strings in a different talis because he knows some of them are kala ilan. But if the tzitzis has multiple strings, then there's the concern that ultimately he may come to go ahead and take the strings for kala ilan. So we'll say, so Rav Nachman essentially understands it as follows: when the concern that a person may come to take the strings and use them for of kala ilan and inadvertently use them for tcheles, that's when the talis will be pasul. When that concern does not apply, the talis will be kosher. Shamis mina, but say, but what do we learn from this? We learn from this, matirin mi beged lebeged. We'll say what we do learn from this is that halacha lemaisa, meaning the takeaway from this, so we'll say for our purposes is that you can go ahead and take tzitzis from one beged to another beged. That is the takeaway, that you could remove tzitzis from one beged and retie them to another beged. We'll say itmar Rav Amar ein matirin beged lebeged, Shmuel Amar matirin beged lebeged. We'll say machlokis Rav and Shmuel. Machlokis Rav and Shmuel. Can you go ahead and untie tzitzis from one beged and retie them to another beged? Rav says yes. Shmuel says no. I'm sorry, just the opposite. Rav says no. Shmuel says yes. Rav Amar, both say, so now we're going to highlight a couple of machloks between Rav and Shmuel. Here we go. Rav Amar ima liki miner l'ner. Both say this is amazing. Right after Yom Kippur, getting ready for the Yom Tovim of the year. Right, Rav says you are not permitted to go ahead and light one Chanukah ner from another Chanukah ner. Right, that's maliki miner l'ner. You can't light from one ner to another ner. Ushmuel Amar maliki miner l'ner. Shmuel says you can kindle one Chanukah ner from another ner. So Rav Amar in halacha Rabbi Shimon b'greira. Rav says the halacha does not follow Rabbi Shimon with dragging a bench on Yom Tov, which we'll discuss on Shabbos. Ushmuel Amar halach Rabbi Shimon b'greira, and Shmuel says the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon b'greira. So we'll say 3 fundamental machloks in between Rav and Shmuel. So case number 1. Can you go ahead and move tzitzis, untie tzitzis from one beged, retie them to another beged? Number 2, can you go ahead and light one Chanukah ner from another Chanukah ner? And do we follow the psak of Rabbi Shimon? We're going to see what Rabbi Shimon's case is in just a moment. Amar Abaye. Abaye says in general, Kol mili dimar avid kirav. In general, we paskin like Rav. Lebar mehani tlas David kishmol. Both say except in these 3 cases where we paskin like Shmuel. Number 1, matirin mi beged lebeged. Right. Ultimately, again, the halacha is Rabbosai that, and this is halacha lemaisa. You could untie tzitzis from one beged and remove them to another beged. And Rabbosai that is true even if what? Even if the first beged is absolutely fine. If you choose that you want a new talis and your first talis is perfectly fine, you could untie tzitzis from the first beged, retied onto the second beged. That's halacha number 1. Number 2, madlikin miner l'ner. Rabbosai we paskin that halacha lemaisa. You are permitted to kindle one ner Chanukah from another ner Chanukah. Again, ideally, the Shulchan Aruch paskin is that we don't do this. We don't do this out of concern that what's going to happen, that a person is going to see what you can't do is, you can't light a candle from one ner Chanukah and then use that to light another ner Chanukah. That you cannot do. What you can do technically is that is aser, because that's called the shimush hedya with the ner. That you can't do. What you can do is directly light one ner Chanukah from another ner Chanukah. But out of concern that a person will inadvertently end up lighting a candle from the Ner and then use up and then light the other Ner. So therefore, again, we don't light Ner Chanukah from Ner Chanukah, but technically you could. And lastly, halacha Rabbi Shimon Begrera. Both say we pass on halacha Rabbi Shimon Begrera. What's the case of Rabbi Shimon? Both say it's actually a very important case. The Sanya Rabbi Shimon Omer Gorer Adamita Ki Se V'Safsel. Both say listen to this. On Shabbos, a person is permitted to drag a bed, a chair, or a bench. Ubilvad shelo yiskavin la'asos charetz. As long as what Rabbi say, as long as you don't have intention to create a furrow. Rabbi say this is what's called a davar she'eino miskavin. We paskin that a davar she'eino miskavin is mutter. That on Shabbos you're allowed to do something which may result in a malacha, as long as it what? As long as it will not definitively result in a malacha, and it's not your kavana. That's called a davar she'eino miskavin. It is asur on Shabbos to create a furrow. Rabbi Shimon says you can go ahead and drag a chair on Shabbos if it will not definitely create a furrow, and it's not your intention to create a furrow. That's davar she'eino miskavin. Of course, if it will definitely create a furrow, then what? Then what? We call that a psik reisha, and that is going to be asur on Shabbos. So we pass in all of those cases. We'll say, just very quickly, we have another minute. Rabbi Yehuda Masrei lekartza. We'll say, by the way, this is a great case because we struggle with this as well. We'll say, what do you do when you go ahead and you have to give your talis to the cleaners, right? And we'll say, anyone ever have this conversation, right, with your cleaners? I know this looks weird. Please don't untie the knots. No, it's not knotted. It's not knotted. Don't untie the knots, right? And make sure you go ahead. So the cleaners here know, Baruch Hashem. I'll say, well, listen to this. In old times, they used to give their tzitzis to the cleaners. So what happens? Rabbi Yehuda Masei lekartza. Rabbi Yehuda gave his clothing, his talis to the cleaners. So we'll say, now, interestingly enough, Rashi understands over here, lekoves v'lo chayesh dilma menaksa tchilis rami b'kala ilan. Now we'll say, the concern that Rabbi Yehuda is voicing over here is, we're not concerned that what? Maybe the tchilis is going to rip, and the cleaners, feels terrible. Nebuch, the blue string ripped. Let me replace the blue string, right? And it's going to bring a blue string. Ultimately, again, that's dyed with the dye from the tree, right, from the kala ilan. We're not concerned about that. Rabbi Chanina avid le sisa. Rabbi Chanina used to roll his tzitzis up in a ball and would give it to the cleaners like that. Essentially telling the cleaners, launder the baged, don't touch the tzitzis. Ravina chayet lemechet. Ravina used to go ahead, and I will say what he would do is he would create like a hem. He would sew the tzitzis into the garment, again making sure that the cleaners would not touch the tzitzis. They would simply launder the garment itself. All right, so we'll stop over here for today. I think I'm going to record the rest of the daf, so we'll start the Mirza Hashem on the top of that base tomorrow. Yeah, no, tomorrow we'll start earlier. Hashem.